Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Public Safety and Health Committee for January 26, 2026. It's 7 o'clock. It's actually 7:27. We've had concurrent committee meetings that have been running long. I am the chair, Jim Posh. We have vice chair, Joe DeWitt Foy. Here, not here, he's on Zoom.
Here.
We have member Craig Cobb. We have Councilmember Cohn. We have Councilmember Larson joining us. We have called the roll call, and we've got a pretty short agenda, but a couple things I think under other business that we can just do some updates on. I mean, I think that the core time is, there's 4 or 5 things that we want to focus on for this year. I'd like to start talking about the deer population survey. There's legislation that we passed. Actually, there's no legislation we had to do on this one because it's under the legislation threshold. So the city is going to hire the USDA to do a deer count survey, count the deer in our community so we can better understand the size of our deer population. We've heard estimates that it could be as high as 800 deer. We don't know. These population surveys are done generally in the winter without leaves on the trees. When it's cold, when they can do thermal imaging, they drive vehicles up and down our streets. It is a similar survey that takes place in our neighboring communities. South Euclid does theirs, I believe, annually because they have a deer sterilization program. And generally, if you do a deer sterilization program, you need to make sure that you do your counts on a very, very regular basis. You just don't start inferring what the numbers are. But before we can decide on any deer management options, even if it's something that's on the table, we really feel like we need to do.
It's that last piece.
Yeah, so we're here just giving you an update that that's going to take place probably in the month of March.
2 questions.
Sure.
Is there a contract that will need to be signed with USDA to do that thermal imaging survey? Is that process started? Because you were quoted $2,200 for the cost. Where is that in the?
So this is an odd situation. Normally, a council member will not intervene themselves and do administrative work. I spoke with the mayor. They decided that I was going to lead the effort as getting the contract to all the right departments, because we really don't have a department set up with the new administration that would manage and take this on as of yet. So what I've done is I've gathered a draft of the contract. It's been given to law and it's gotten pre-approval. It has gone to finance. It has gone through the path where now we're waiting on a final contract from the USDA, and I believe that probably would be signed any day, I would believe. I'm unsure of exactly if it's actually gotten to the law department yet, but it's on the verge of being signed.
Because you were talking with them about doing it in February or March.
USDA thought it might make sense to do ours the same time that one of our neighboring cities was going to be doing. This way you wouldn't be counting 2 deers at the same time.
All they have to do is come to my backyard. They'll see at least
That's
20
what I
or
was
30.
gonna ask you too.
Yeah.
I have a herd that's settled down in the back behind my garage. So there is an empty lot behind me, but can the thermal imaging see through a building to see that there are deer bodies in the back?
So the way this works is there's mathematical formulas that they use. They don't drive down all the streets. They drive down a certain number of the streets depending on the density of those streets, and they're able to infer exactly what the count, not exactly, but they're able to estimate. Let's go with an estimate. They're able to give you an estimate of what your deer population is in comparison to neighboring cities. So.
I'm not feeding the deer, by the way. It's a wonderful sanctuary for them.
Well, you bring up a fair question. There's been some legislation that has been, okay, so I'm gonna roll into kind of the planning process, and I would like to start the conversation by, we have 2 new members, just update everybody on some of the things that we've spoken about or react to things that have recently been presented to us. But since we're on the topic of deer, Councilmember Larson, you worked to get some legislation through the law department to prohibit the feeding of deer and wildlife.
And then we put that on hold because we wanted to get the data finished, get the final data piece in place. So it's in the law department, and as soon as we say to them, we're ready to move forward, then we can put that out there for the public to see. But right now it's on hold. So if you want me to change that status, I can.
I don't think it's my decision. I think it's a collective decision.
Yeah.
I mean, we were gonna wait until we got a population survey.
Yeah.
Do we feel like it's important to
Yeah.
to hold or proceed with that? So I asked everybody that.
I don't know why we don't go forward with it.
I mean, I think we
No
know
need
from
to
the
hold
other
it.
survey
I mean,
that
I don't need a survey to tell me that we have a deer issue in the city. And if feeding the deer is contributing to that problem, then we need to take that step right now to address it.
Well, the experts have told us that it contributes to the problem.
Yeah.
Councilmember DeWitt Foy, what's your thoughts?
I do not have an issue holding or moving forward with the legislation. I think the survey is necessary for any deer management next steps, but in terms of this just feels like a reasonable legislation, and I don't think we need to wait for that survey to come back.
Let me ask you this.
But moving it
Yeah.
forward.
As the new committee members, would you like me to share with you that legislation that is in the law department for vetting first, or would
Yeah.
you like me to go ahead? Or maybe I can do it simultaneously, send you a copy of the legislation. The pieces I have are a sample legislation from another city and then some supporting documents along with it. So that's what I have.
Is it specific to deer, or is it like a broader
No, it's-
prohibition on feeding wildlife?
Unfortunately, when people have bird feeders, that becomes an issue for some longer neck deer, but it is specific to deer, Joe. So
Okay.
I tell you what I'll do. I'll send you a copy of that.
I think the way to proceed is, yes, I would send it to
information.
Addie to send it to all council members.
Okay.
And then as in council leadership, I would suggest you use your discretion on when you'd want that to show up on our regular council agenda.
Let me find out where law is at on it, because it has been on hold, and I'll ask them to put it together, because they are gonna be writing the legislation based on the background information I sent them. So I'll go ahead and do that.
Okay. Other things in the mix? Okay, so I'm kind of working on just starting a seed for our planning commission. I'm gonna list a whole bunch of things and then maybe yes, Joe.
Have we started any, I know we need to wait for the survey to, move forward with next steps, but have we had any initial conversations with neighboring municipalities around joining their efforts or collaborating in some way?
I was approached by the former CIO of Shaker, who expressed an interest in including us in the Beechwood Shaker consortium. There was some interest there. They expressed interest to have a conversation. Okay, so there's been no further discussions other than that. I think at the time, we felt a little uncomfortable jumping down a path that would look like a decision has been made to do deer management. Which basically means shooting, sterilizing, until we really had a handle on what our deer population was. Last when we spoke with ODNR, they gave us this estimate that it could be as high as 800 deer. It was probably likely in that scale. They said it could be lower, but but I believe the number was somewhere between 300 and 800. But I mean, their general convention of wisdom was it's the higher number. I think we went back, we realized, hey, we really need to get a survey before we could do anything. I would tend to think that if we're gonna do this, we would do this with another municipality. And those decisions are made in the summer because the deer management, the techniques they use, the sterilization, the shooting, that all happens right around this time of year. It happens in the winter. And there's a lot that leads up to this. There's additional surveys that we need to get from our from the public. You have to get a permit from ODNR in order to do this. So and they require a survey. There's an open survey right now. It's really indicating to them overwhelmingly more than any other community that they've seen that we have a problem compared to other cities. So that's an issue. If we're looking at a less or a more humane option, which is the sterilization option, those contracts are executed by the people that do the sterilization come from the East Coast, and they sort of just come into the city and they do all the cities. And there's not a lot of people that actually do this. And that's where Shaker and I believe Beechwood are doing that. This year they've gotten on the bandwagon with South Euclid. So we'd probably wanna get involved in that. You know, I really don't wanna talk about shooting right now because I think we really need to get the data before we go there. But I think the goal is to get some data in the April timeframe and then work with the administration on assigning this to a department. We work with the administration, we work with the public, we work with ourselves to see if this is something that we wanna do. It would be unfunded because it's not budgeted. But it's work that would actually happen in 2026 anyways. Just thinking out loud. I have a
2027.
I'm a year behind already. Yeah, it's January already. I
So
should
but it would be good to have it in the summer, cause then we would budget for it
for
for the 2027 budget
2027.
process,
So it's, I was gonna say that it was not budgeted for this year, but we wouldn't be doing anything this year.
I would also like to add that the workshop that Counselor Posh and I went to was very clear that University Heights and Cleveland Heights are the only cities that don't do deer management. And so the other cities are as interested in us doing deer management as we are in doing it. So they're looking at us to become part of any group effort. They really are, so.
So just with that timeline in mind, sounds like a lot of steps that would need to happen between now and potentially summer when these decisions when these conversations are happening. So fully agree that we need to have the data and then have community engagement, additional feedback about any decision, but I just want to keep that timeline in mind so that we are preparing for the time when we do need to make a decision, and we don't just, roll past that because we're not ready.
So what I would encourage is if anybody has not seen our public hearing that we had in, I believe, the first part of April.
It's been that long.
It's been in April of last year. The first half of that hearing are presentations from ODNR as well as the Metro Parks. And it's really very informative, very data driven, explains what they do, why they do what they do, and the ramifications if you do or don't. So there's also this thing that ODNR puts on maybe every 2 months or so, or no, about twice a year maybe. That's also worthwhile, but the people that are in those presentations are here, they were here in our council chambers giving this presentation. I would put on I would look at that. It's really, especially if we're gonna have to be making some difficult decisions. It's really very, very informative.
And did we ever get updated data on the deer vehicle crash
Not yet.
from most recent?
No. I think once we have this, we can then have ODNR work with us on that data.
Yeah.
We do know that deer carcasses are being collected, or I believe they're collected by Public Works. And then the crashes are marked in a police database of some sort.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of a key measurement that they use. So, any other deer thoughts, questions, comments? Okay, I'm just gonna go through just a couple items that we talked about and then open it up to everybody to have a conversation on where we stand. Some of these are just updates. Shaker had a survey that went out, and it was very, very clear that people in Shaker, their number one concern was traffic safety. And we know that we're a neighboring community. Part of this survey came from data that came out of a resident satisfaction survey. This is when we had the whole survey brouhaha with the former mayor. We did pass legislation to hire a ETC. That work is stalled at this point. It is stalled because we have a new administration and they're digesting an awful lot of stuff right now and they just can't get to it. They have draft survey questions from ETC based on the existing past surveys. The intent when I spoke to our communications department that is managing this is think about maybe in the March timeframe that we'll be able to get this resident satisfaction survey. This is sort of like the gold standard. It's what cities do on a regular basis. And it's a way that you can sort of measure yourself. We know the data is not going to look good just because there's sort of a downward trend of non-trust of elected officials and a non-trust of government entities at this point. So those kind of surveys results will be down, but at least we'll be able to get some data on really what are the concerns of our city. But it was all pretty much driven by our concern about traffic safety and what we're going to do about it. So that's really two things.
And that last time that our survey was done here in Cleveland Heights was 2020.
2020.
Wow.
And it's online. It's worth looking at.
And they were doing it every 2 years up to that point for the most
I
part.
believe every 2 years. We had some inquiries about people looking for help with installing fire smoke detectors. We're getting some information on that right now. Apparently it's a program that we do have in the city, or maybe not a program, but a partnership we have with the Red Cross. We're trying to get some more information about that. We've reached out to the courts in the past to get citation data to sort of measure the number of citations that we issue to our residents, or not necessarily residents, but vehicle citations. It's a good measure to see really how many traffic stops there are, what those traffic stops contain. And I'll reach out to JJ and his court to get that, and I'll share information with all of council on what that looks like. We've had police statistics last year posted up on the website, on the police department website. I would encourage all of us to look at that. You'll be able to look at trends. There's been, we had one of our meetings that was supposed to be, we were gonna give the Cleveland Heights for Immigrants' Rights time to speak to us. We ended up giving them the whole meeting time. They had a lot to say. They had a lot of people here. But we listened, and I don't know where we're at with that. I do believe, though, that our law department and administration, from their communications to us, is looking at things. And I think it probably makes sense for us to circle back with the administration just to kind of see where they are at some point in time.
President Kuda and I are speaking with Mayor Petrus tomorrow about the situation and the issue.
Okay.
It's become, we need to have a strategy. That's what we're gonna talk to him with him about tomorrow.
That same group has they have a letter writing campaign concerned about our use of flock cameras. I did have a quick conversation with our police force, just a very, very high level cursory conversation. And my notes are basically these cameras keep us safe. There's been a number of homicides in this city that have been solved with them. Traffic deaths, unintended traffic deaths that has been solved by them. Issues with like Amber Alert, helpful. I'm told these cameras are not video cameras, but they just take pictures of license plates, so they basically track a license plate. They're not used for spying, and they really have brought down the violent crimes that we've had. I'm gonna reach out to our mayor at some point and try to get some more information on their use and the budgeting of that, just to try to get a sense of what's going on.
I may also add, the meeting I was at on Saturday, is the concern is that the data that we collect here goes up to the feds. And so that is becoming a flashpoint that we're also speaking with our Mayor Petras tomorrow about.
Okay.
To see what that contract looks like with Flock.
Okay,
I'll get back to you, something that maybe I can share, I don't know how to share that information, but I think it's how would it be best to share what I just talked about, those two things, the Immigration Alliance and the Flock camera situation.
well, maybe you can come to our next public safety and health committee
Okay.
and discuss it there. Because I do think when we start having these conversations where the camera needs to be on, people need to be hearing it.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people that are interested in this and on all different sides of the issues. And I just think if we're having this conversation, it probably needs to be not in an email, just people should know we're talking about it in this date and this is what's going on.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, so this is sort of what,
To cameras, Chair, the flock contract is, my understanding is we're about 2 years into a 5-year contract, but separate from that, we have the standard police, like the blue light cameras that are in a number of business districts, they're in our parks. And my understanding is they were still working on installing. That was a capital purchase and they had installed a number of them. Do you know where we are in that process?
well, we can get an update on that. Ryan, the director of IT, came in. He's been helping, trying to work through the logistics. Just to recap a little bit, a lot of cameras, and I don't know the percentage. I want to think maybe a third of them went up. The other ones are boxed because there's trouble getting them on poles.
But
Yes.
what type, are those the flock cameras or
No.
no, so that I think is a misconception. Because we talk about, and it's even a line item, I think in the budget was under surveillance, but it's the blue light police cameras, so maybe we need something from the chief at a council meeting or something that's in a public forum that explains more about that. I think it's confusing and unclear as to what we have in the city right now.
So we have surveillance cameras that are on. I don't believe they're monitored. I believe they're used for after the fact things, and that data stays within Cleveland Heights.
And that, but I just think we need consistent terminology, right? What are surveillance cameras? Are those our police internal data cameras that data is not shared? Is the flock situation different? I just need a lot of.
Yeah, there's 2 separate systems. So there's a
Yeah.
flock system that where we have a contract with. We're about 2 years into that 5-year contract. I believe it was a $250,000 allocation in 2024. And then there's the capital purchase of the police in blue light surveillance cameras. And those we have, my understanding is allocated and spent the money, but they're not fully installed.
That is correct.
Can I make one more suggestion, and perhaps this is a topic, Vice President Larson, for your conversation tomorrow to bring back to us, is with, I think that outside of the request for Cleveland Heights for immigrants' rights and their 8-point proposal, there are things that we as the city could do, particularly around sharing information about events or education opportunities. So I'd love to hear if the administration would be willing to leverage our communication channels to share events, trainings, vigils, public forums, protests, et cetera, and understand what parameters we could share with community members. And the same, by the way, and Councilman DeWitt Foy, I didn't share this with you either, but also regarding the school district, I think there's a lot of willingness to use our communication channels for the school district events and PTA things, but it would be good if we could confirm that with the current administration and then be able to authoritatively direct people to Director Shantz instead of asking and having to figure out and all of that, with each question.
So I understand that the city of Cleveland put together sort of they published something on their website maybe, but it was basically like if you need help, if you need a lawyer, these are some of the non-for-profits that you can call.
And I know that from doing some research on Sunday that the city of Columbus has an entire landing page of support where they have legal support links, nonprofit links, et cetera. I mean, that's also an avenue that we can do for residents who are seeking information. This all presupposes that anyone can navigate our current website. It's not excellent, but perhaps there could be something, a flag or a banner on the front page if they're willing to put that together. Or be part of the website rebuild that I think they're working on.
Okay.
I will bring that up, yep.
I think that would be helpful. Okay, so I just did like a big data dump from the last couple months. Anybody have any thoughts? Well, of all these things for me, traffic safety seems to be a huge issue. And I know our administration is working on a bunch of things. I'm concerned that it's good work, it's somewhat fragmented, and it's dependent on getting grant money. What can we do and what can we do fast? I know this was a big item for Council Member Petrus, now Mayor Petrus. I'm wondering if it makes sense to have a conversation with him and bring that conversation back to the committee on what he may think the city administration can help to sort of maybe ease our concerns about traffic safety.
So one point I'd like to make is that it is not dependent on grant funding to fund safety improvements. That's typically how Cleveland Heights has funded these programs, but we could certainly allocate funding towards any of these programs. And I would like to see us move in that direction. So obviously there is some money budgeted for 26 around traffic calming. I think that was we had some specific projects in mind. We could always change that allocation, but really thinking forward to 27, we can certainly allocate funding towards these programs. Some of that will go towards matching funds if we are lucky enough to get grants, but I don't want to see us wait and only fund these things if and when we get a grant.
So it seems like I'm going to react to that. And I totally agree with what you're saying. Back in 2024, we had certain things that happened. We had a certain number of traffic tables that we got from NOACA that went up. We had some traffic calming around hard courts that was deployed. There was one other thing. I think it was a circle.
Windsor in the Caledonia area.
Yes.
And there are some traffic circles on the Compton Trail.
Compton Trail. That's what I was thinking of. But tangible things. When asked by a citizen, "What are you guys doing about traffic safety?" It's just like boom, you could give a list. I don't think in 2025 I can give such a list.
Well, may I add, and then I'm gonna have to go, that the Transportation Mobility Committee has worked very hard at rewriting Complete and Green Streets policy. Joe's aware of this too, that the Transportation Mobility Committee, all of those people are passionate about traffic calming and traffic safety. And at the moment, Chris Brace has been working with Director Klingscale and Eric Zamp, Director Zampt, and they are looking at if they have now Director Klingscale's list of streets that she's gonna resurface is out, that they'll look at a major resurfacing project and discuss in design before it goes over to Public Works. If she has a timetable, Director Klingscale has a timetable for getting her street resurfacing projects bid out. But before that point, to talk about what might be done for bike lanes, for pedestrian safety, that sort of thing. And we're just waiting for the administration to accept that involvement of the Transportation Mobility Committee at that level. Because traffic calming's not, we don't have any visible really projects. The traffic circle Caledonia is a joke, and Harcourt may be working, but people laugh about the one in Compton. So we have work to do, and if anything you can do to expedite traffic safety in this committee, I would really appreciate it. Really, really would appreciate it. Speeding's still a factor, right? Speeding's still a factor.
It is.
Although we've had more enforcement recently.
Yes.
So that means exploring traffic enforcement cameras, which more and more communities are starting to look at.
You mean the
Particularly
red light cameras?
the cameras that are in
Automated speed.
automated speed and with a
Illegal?
focus,
I have an answer for
a
that.
focus in our business districts and our school zones.
You want an update on the traffic? I mean, what we know about traffic cameras? Gotta go.
But I,
Joe?
Yeah, so two things, I mentioned this when we were talking about council priorities, or committee of the whole meeting recently, but two programs that I think we could either restart or stand up fairly easily. It would be more of a budget allocation versus a legislative, program or a legislative fix, but we have an existing neighborhood traffic calming program that is currently not functioning. So working with the administration to revamp that, adjust some of the criteria, but really figure out a way to make some progress on the streets that we do know have a lot of concerns and speeding issues. So something to jumpstart or restart that neighborhood traffic calming program. And then City of Cleveland has an existing speed table request process. And that would be another one that we could look at. City of Cleveland has implemented a program where they've brought speed table design and build in-house. So typically when they resurface a road, they assess it to see if it's a candidate or appropriate for traffic calming, and if the speed table is appropriate there, then they have a team, their public works department, that will actually put those down. So they don't have to bid those out. It's not a separate process from the actual resurfacing, but they put them down on the roads that are getting resurfaced because they'll last longer, and newly resurfaced roads are nice and smooth and people tend to speed on those. So sort of a dual purpose there. We could easily look to them, see what they're doing, mimic something. I don't know that that's a legislative approach, or it's just something that the administration could do if it were funded. But those are two other thoughts.
Just that for anyone that's over in the Larchmere area, they've installed them on 127th Street. They're permanent part of the roadway. They are quite effective in slowing traffic down on that busy road.
And
It's
exactly
like
that
3 in a
was
row.
just resurfaced, and then they put down the speed tables, a few months after that.
Because these temporary speed tables, they don't last in a heavy traffic area. That one that they put on Taylor Road. It was,
I think those are more appropriate for demonstration project or to assess, if it's gonna be out there for 6 months. And actually, City of Cleveland did just that. They used a number of the temporary speed tables to get down and then collect data. I believe the data they saw, don't quote me on this, but I think it was something like a 6 to 7 mile per hour average decrease. And that was sufficient to move ahead with the permanent approach.
yeah. And our planning department, I believe, has the data. They know what streets have the traffic volume and how fast those drivers are going.
Well, it seems to me, as we do sort of our research on what we could do, because I do think it's a legislative item if we fund this.
Certainly for funding, I just don't know if there's a legislative approach to, I don't know that we need to create a new program legislatively. Certainly the funding would be.
Well, I think this is where we need to work hand in hand with our administration and get a sense of where they're at. So I will extend the olive branch to Mayor Petrus. Again, I know he's real interested. Even the concept of the traffic cameras, Councilman Cobb, that you mentioned, where we can't necessarily keep the proceeds if a traffic camera is put in outside of a school zone, but there's some kind of penalty if someone's going too fast. I mean, there's the traffic safety component to that. Or maybe there's some middle ground so people really understand that, hey, we're gonna do some targeted enforcement in this area. I don't know, it seems to me that there needs to be more work done on this and a higher priority. And I think, I'm hopeful. So, and I know this is sort of in the safety committee, what I would really like to have is, 7 council members stand up and say, hey, this is a really, really important thing. I'd love to be able to have a residential satisfaction survey that comes out, hey, this is a really, really important thing. I mean, we need to put more resources in this particular area. So I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, using real data.
Could we potentially invite the mayor and relevant department heads, so maybe police, planning, and public works, to the next safety committee where we discuss some of these options? And then I think what would follow from that is based on, when we do get data around the satisfaction survey, I think that will help us prioritize funding decisions. I don't think we need that information to start to make progress on understanding what we can do. And then hopefully we can make decisions, whether mid-year or into next year's budget, about how to prioritize and fund some of these programs.
Well, we've had great participation in this committee with both the police chief, Public Works, Director Klingsdale, the planning committee, or the planning department, and all their various facets that they've done this. So we've been down that road before. We know that there's a lot of things in the works. This was actually before Mayor Petrus took office. I think it's worthy to have a conversation with him, see what we could do with him first, and then he could work with his department leaders and then bring them in here. It almost can we just have like a comprehensive plan? I mean, I've heard that, the departments are collaborating better together. There was concern if you do a traffic safety, you would impact something another department was doing, and there was some, hesitancy to possibly do some things in the past. So I'd like to talk to our leadership on the administration side. Maybe what you're suggesting is bring the mayor in for our next meeting, just to see what he could
I
do.
think that'd be great, get his sense, and then, you know, I can help prepare some options, some suggestions, work with you on the agenda, but, you know, kind of talk through 4 or 5 different programs or suggestions, see where he thinks there's room for that and where potentially, you know, additional funding would be needed.
That'd be great.
So that makes sense.
So, okay, so it's time. I know we were sort of, I don't want to say shortchanged with meeting times tonight, but we are a couple of minutes over our 8 o'clock time. We've got staff here that's helping us out, so I do think that we need to call it quits. Is there anything else before I adjourn the meeting we should talk about?
Not here.
Okay, so next month we'll have a more complete meeting. Thank you for being here. Let's adjourn.